the truth about my breastfeeding journey. I have been avoiding filming this video even though it's been requested. Becoming a new mom under a worldwide pandemic, being pregnant the entire quarantine, and then having your baby's first few months of life still under quarantine has been one of the hardest challenges I've ever had to go through in my life. In an effort not to make this video too repetitive or too long, I am going to link my birth story in the cards as well as in the description box. And if you haven't watched my birth story, I really would appreciate it if you would pause this video and go watch my birth story to understand my personal birth story and what happened, because there were a lot of medical complications with my labor and delivery, which led to a more challenging and difficult postpartum recovery. I also do have a history of depression before pregnancy, and it's something I've been working with and managing my entire life and really got a handle on it before I got pregnant. However, with everything going on, the circumstances of my pregnancy, and just feeling incredibly isolated with the hormones and then being pregnant and then realizing that I was still grieving the loss of my mom, a lot of new things came up during my pregnancy and I developed prenatal depression. Kind of lasted from my end of second trimester all the way through my pregnancy. I also developed PUPS. I also had preeclampsia at the end of my labor, which resulted in an emergency C-section. Breastfeeding is one of the most dogmatic and controversial topics, not controversial, opinionated driving topics out there online, and I don't want anybody to feel that their way is wrong or not the best, because that is what I felt online for the longest time and why I think it took me so long to share the truth about my breastfeeding journey. And I'm making this video not to persuade you in your choices or your journey, but hopefully if you experience some of the issues or the feelings and thoughts that I had while breastfeeding, that you know you are not alone. And if you're having an amazing breastfeeding journey and it's so easy for you, that maybe my story will help you understand why it's important to support our fellow non-breastfeeding moms, new moms, or moms in general, and be mindful of the fact that everybody's story and everybody's body and everybody's health is unique to their own. Sharing my story to hopefully help you feel less alone, or to hopefully help you understand maybe somebody in your life that's going through something, and also maybe to give you perspective on breastfeeding. Fed is best. I'm going to repeat that a lot. Fed is best. I want to be very clear that while there is a huge movement in the whole breast is best and breastfeeding journey, and the longer you can breastfeed the better for your baby, and there's a lot of people that are able to breastfeed longer than 12 months, longer than 6 months, longer than 4 months, longer than 2 months, that's great. That's amazing. And I'm so happy that you are able to do that. But if you cannot do that, or don't want to do that, that's great. And I'm happy you made that decision for you and your family. One of the hardest things becoming a mom is dealing with the mom guilt. You are constantly doubting yourself and questioning yourself with your first child, maybe even with your second. That's innate. That's already in us. We are going to doubt, we are going to question, we are going to worry, and we are going to stress unnecessarily. And you can tell us not to, but it is going to happen on some level. Outside pressures of all of the information of how amazing breastfeeding is, and all of the social media posts of how beautiful breastfeeding is and how wondrous this is that we can feed our babies, is very much pushing all of us to want to breastfeed and want to have this beautiful journey and connection with our babies. But there are so many reasons that we cannot breastfeed, or maybe need to stop, or make the decision to stop. And the beautiful thing about being a mother these days is that we have the option to breastfeed or to not breastfeed. We have the option to do both, and we have the option to pump, and we have the option to use formula, and we have options. That is what we should focus on. Options, educating us on those options, and giving us better, more innovative options. I am a certified nutritionist through Precision Nutrition. I have dealt with a lot of bad relationships with my own body image and food. Growing up in the entertainment industry, it's kind of hand in hand. And it took me a long time to heal my relationship with food and to also understand nutrition and to find ways to not only understand nutrition, but understand that nutrition, like most things in life, is not a one-size-fits-all. When I found out I was pregnant, I did a deep dive into all the research of breastfeeding, of formula. The nutrient density of breast milk just seems like the best option. From a purely nutritionist point of view, I want to breastfeed my baby. Based on the science and the information I had, I was determined to breastfeed, and I was going to do it for an entire year, and I was going to do it for as long as my baby was going to need milk. I was determined. I researched and watched videos and listened to podcasts and read and deep dived and took notes. I had a notebook of how I was going to breastfeed and how to troubleshoot and all the different tips and all the different hacks and what to eat to make sure my body was producing enough, that I had enough calories, that I was healthy enough, that I was going to feed my baby because this was a gift I could give to her. I even understood that maybe my milk wasn't going to come in right away and I would have to subsidize with some formula. So I started reading all of the information about the different formulas available to us here in the US and all the different brands and all the different ingredients, and I was really unhappy with all of the formulas. My biggest concern was I didn't want to feed my baby seed oils or low-fat whey and soy and cornstarch and corn syrup. Now, while I was able to find organic formulas that didn't have the corn syrup or the sugars that I preferred she didn't have right away, I wasn't really able to eliminate palm oil or seed oils from the formulas, even the more expensive ones, even the ones that I was willing to import from Germany or Sweden. That was very disappointing, which put the pressure on me with my nutrition background to want to even breastfeed further. It just didn't seem like formulas existed, no matter where I looked, that did not have palm oil or some sort of seed oil. And that was something that I really didn't want my baby to have, because it's something I truly tried to avoid for my family. Palm oils and seed oils are highly inflammatory because they're highly hydrogenated and processed. They're just not really the best. They're cheap, and essentially why we use it in manufacturing. And forget about the other ethical issues with it when it comes to environment and all that stuff. It's almost impossible to eliminate, and while I avoid it at all costs in my home, I do understand that when we go out to eat, I kind of have to let it be, and I do my best. But for my baby, this unborn bundle of cells that it was my job to protect and to nurture and to nourish, I wanted it to be perfect. And I knew that if I didn't consume it and I was able to feed my baby with my breast milk, it would be fine, because I could not find formula that did not have palm oil in it. I could find formula that was better, but I couldn't find that perfect baby formula. Going into labor and delivery, going into my third trimester, I knew I wanted to have formula just in case, but I just couldn't find formula that I was happy with. So I was like, well, don't worry, I'll figure it out. I'm gonna breastfeed anyways. Worst case scenario, we'll just buy the Holly formula that I wanted. Of course, if you watched my birth story, everything that I had preferences for went out the window, and I ended up with an emergency C-section. And a lot of it, I think, had to do with the stress and the pressure I was under during my entire pregnancy, and really the depression I was dealing with for most of my pregnancy into labor and delivery. After having my C-section and being in the postpartum recovery room, I had never felt the kind of hopelessness and depression I had ever experienced. I was still going through and trying to process the trauma. My body and my mind and my emotions had just happened, and here was this baby that would not stop crying. And I know babies cry, but she would not stop crying. And we had the perfect latch. She never had a problem latching, but I had a problem with my milk, and it wasn't coming in. And logically I knew that the milk wasn't going to come in for a couple of days. So I did everything I could. I massaged, I pumped, I massaged, I pumped. But she was so hungry that she would not stop crying, and we didn't know what to do. We breastfed both boobs, 20 minutes each side. I would pump for 20 minutes. She was just starving. So a nurse came in and said, your baby won't stop crying because that's a hunger cry. And I just looked at her, I'm like, well, what are we supposed to do? And she's just like, I can bring you formula. And I'm like, well, of course, feed my baby. When you see your baby hungry and crying for food like that, you know, we're just exhausted and we don't know what to do. We think that maybe she's getting the colostrum and that's enough for her, but it wasn't. Once that nurse let us know that our baby was hungry, we immediately gave her formula, and we gave her 1 ounce. So the routine in the hospital was, we would breastfeed for 20 minutes on each boob, hand Lillian off to Chris. Chris would finish her off with 1 to 2 ounces of formula. I would be pumping with the hospital pump for an additional 15 minutes to try and get my milk flow to start coming in and to really just start having milk production. And then Chris would change her and I would try and get some rest. This went on for about 48 hours and I just had to get out of there. So I asked to be discharged early. I did everything I needed to, hit all the markers I needed to get discharged early, and was sent home. Gratefully, my doctor was going to come see me at my home the next day. I brought Lillian home and I was just a mess. I felt alone, I felt angry, I felt bitter, I felt overwhelmed, and I did not know what to do. I kept the routine up with Lillian, with her feeding every 2 hours. Nurse for 20 minutes each boob, which would be 40 minutes. I would then pump for another 15 to 20 minutes while Chris topped her off with 1 to 2 ounces of formula. We would just repeat, repeat, repeat. I was exhausted. I felt like my body was breaking and I felt like I was getting worse. After a couple of days, I decided I needed to actually sleep longer than 30 minutes. And the only way we were going to do that was to not have me nurse and pump at that extreme routine overnight. We would stretch the overnight and Chris would take care of Lillian with formula. Lillian never had an issue with latching, never had an issue with sucking. It always felt like I was not enough. And finally my milk came in around day 4 and I was overjoyed and I thought, this is it, this is it. I was eating the traditional Chinese recovery foods plus more. I was drinking a ton of water. I was taking my medication for my C-section, my stool softeners, and I was taking my vitamins again, and I was trying to stay in bed as much as possible. But that is literally an oxymoron to tell a mom to stay in bed and rest as much as possible with a newborn baby who needs to be fed. I was in a lot of pain still. The pain was getting better. I was managing it better, and my doctor convinced me to take my pain medication more consistently, even though I didn't want to during the day. I was worried it was going to affect my milk supply, and I was worried that it was going to be given to Lillian through my breast milk. She convinced me that the small amount of medication that would get through my breast milk was okay. It still worried me because I had a prescription for oxy, stool softeners, ibuprofen, and acetaminophen, which is essentially Tylenol. I had prescription strength Tylenol, Advil, and oxy. So I tried to only take the Tylenol and Advil during the day when I was doing most of my breastfeeding and most of my pumping sessions. I had to take the oxy a couple times at night just so I could sleep through the pain. After about 4 weeks of this, my C-section seemed to be recovering, and I felt like I was recovering physically a little bit from labor and delivery. I was still keeping up this routine. We stretched the overnights where I would get 6 hours of sleep and Chris would be doing the 2 hours feedings so that I could try and sleep and recover. My body will not recover without sleep. That is just who I am, and that is me. Around week 4, I started to feel a little bit better. I thought maybe my milk I was working really hard at getting more milk, but I was never able to produce the amount of milk that Lillian needed per feeding. And at one point around week 4, my body started to hurt. I felt like I had full body arthritis. When I would get up in the mornings out of bed, I would collapse. It took every ounce of me to hold myself up. My arches had fallen, my ankles were constantly in pain. I felt like my bones were breaking and my ligaments were falling apart, and I didn't know what was going on because I should be recovering. I should be feeling better. And right when I started to feel better, everything seemed to fall apart again. And mentally, that was just destroying me and my morale, because I am someone who is very physically active, who enjoys being physical and busy and being able to do things, and I couldn't even hold my own baby without hurting. I went in on a deep dive, and it wasn't long before I found these forums where women were asking the same questions I was asking. Was like, I started to feel better, and then I started to feel like I had like some sort of autoimmune disease that was triggered from pregnancy. And that was kind of this theme I was finding. A lot of women were finding that after they had a C-section, they started to recover, and then they started to decline again, and they were feeling full body pains. Some women felt like they had rheumatoid arthritis. Some women felt like they had fibromyalgia, that they couldn't find answers. They ran a ton of blood work. All of their blood work, it wasn't concerning. They ran their thyroids, all this stuff. I actually had my thyroids run. I had a bunch of extra blood work run. Everything turned out to be normal, within the normal range, because I did also break out into full body hives at one point during this time. Medically speaking, I was recovering. Things were happening, things were progressing in a positive light, but I felt like I was dying. It wasn't until I found that other women who also had a C-section, specifically because they had preeclampsia and pups and had an emergency C-section and were breastfeeding, did I realize, okay, something's going on here. So I tried to fix it through nutrition by drinking more bone broth, by eating more food, by drinking more water, and I then started to swell and gain more weight as well. But I just kept on it because I wanted to offer breast milk to my baby. I wanted Lillian to at least get breast milk. We were never ever able to just do a solid feeding with just breast milk. And if I was, it was because I pumped for like 2 sessions and was able to save it up and give it to her as a bottle. And I was really sad about it. I was sad that I wasn't able to just breastfeed. I was sad that I still had to pump after every nursing session because it took the joy out of that connection, and it made me feel like an object. And then of course I got a duck clot, and it hurts. It didn't fully develop into mastitis, but it hurts. So I don't even want to know what it felt like to have full-blown boob flu. Second, I got that clot because of my notebooks of information for an event that this happened. I immediately started doing hot compresses, manual massages, hand expressing, and sitting in hot showers and hot baths. And that was a lot of time and energy, and a lot of time away from being with Lillian, and a lot of time away from being with my husband. And I just felt like this newborn time was being robbed from me. I fell in love with hand expressing because, unlike pumping, it didn't make me feel like an object, and it wasn't as demoralizing. So I would nurse Lillian on both boobs for 20 minutes each, and then I would hand express into a Haka pump, and that gave me a little bit of light and a little bit of hope. And I loved hand expressing. It was more primal, it felt less invasive, and it was much more comfortable for me. So I did that for a few more weeks, and then the postpartum depression just got worse, and it just kept getting worse. We decided that I was no longer going to pump at all, and that I would focus on the connection with Lillian and just connecting with her and nursing in the mornings and the afternoons and the evenings. We weren't going to do it every 2 hours. We were going to just do it for 3 feedings a day for the connection and the bonding, and to give her some breast milk. And we did that for another month. I loved it, but while I stopped feeling as much pain in my body, my hormones became incredibly out of whack. I started gaining weight instead of losing weight or even maintaining weight. And I started gaining weight quite excessively. I didn't know what was going on. And so I kind of just started monitoring what I was eating and looking at what I was eating and what I was doing. And there was no reason for me to be gaining weight at the rate I was gaining the weight. And that told me, because I had experienced this in the past, that I was very low on testosterone and over producing estrogen. I might still be within the markers of healthy or normal. And when you're breastfeeding, your body is still in somewhat of a state of thinking that you're pregnant. It's a lot of the reasons why sometimes when you're breastfeeding, you don't have your period right away, or you have irregular periods. I just knew. I knew with the excessive weight gain and rapid weight gain that didn't make sense, it was because of my hormones. And forget about weight and aesthetics. When I have low testosterone, I have the worst depression and mental thoughts that I ever have. And the last time this happened to me was probably the darkest times I had to deal with mentally. And it wasn't until we fixed my hormone through nutrition and exercise that I was able to get a grasp on who I was and who I am mentally again and feel okay again. Chris urged me to quit nursing, and I had so much guilt. And I also felt like I was being robbed of this experience. And then I felt like I never got to just truly enjoy this beautiful breastfeeding journey, or being able to nourish my baby or give her this thing or even bond with her, because there was this constant pain and nagging and turmoil that happened every time we nursed, because I would be counting down to the seconds that I would have to go put the pumps on, or I'd be worried if she was actually suckling, and it was a nightmare. And so Chris finally put his foot down, and he doesn't do it very often with me in things that I want to do, especially when it comes to my body. But he urged me and highly, highly encouraged me to just stop breastfeeding, because it was messing with my mental state at this point, both literally, chemically, and just adding to the emotional element of things. So at 4 months, I stopped breastfeeding. And it was so hard, because even though we were not breastfeeding every feeding session, it killed me not to be able to bond with Lillian like that, because I'm gonna be honest, I did not bond with Lillian, and the only time I felt any connection with her was during breastfeeding when we were nursing. It took me a very long, of course I loved her, of course this is my baby, I love her, I immediately want to protect her and take care of her, but there was a lack of connection, and there's a lack of mom and daughter bond for me for those first 4 months, because I was going through all of these things. Once I stopped breastfeeding and worked through that guilt, which I still have sometimes, we went exclusively to formula and bottle, I started to feel better. It took a while, and I'm telling you, I stopped at 4 months. It's 9 months now. I'm only now starting to feel like myself again. And that's thanks to me being able to slowly let go of this breastfeeding journey that I was supposed to have, or this breastfeeding concept I had in my mind, so that I could enjoy my baby and get to know her and get to bond with her in other ways, and get to watch her grow and develop and get to be with her in different ways. And I'm not even 100% back to feeling good about myself mentally. Forget about the physical, we're just talking about the mental and emotional state right now. I am just now at 9 months feeling like I can be a good mom, that I can be there with her. And I sometimes look back and wonder, what if I had just stopped at 2 months? What if I had just stopped in that hospital room and said, look, I have had a rough go, and I need to just formula feed so that I can focus on being the best mom for her by taking care of me too. The reality of it is that as moms, especially in modern day society, whatever we can do to take away that pressure and that stress, whatever we can do to take care of ourselves so we can be there fully for our baby and our children, that is the goal. And that should be the goal. And that should be the push. Whether that's breastfeeding, whether that's pumping, whether that's formula, whether that's a combination of everything, whatever works for you and your family with the lowest amount of stress and pressure is the best for you and your family. Whatever is going to be the best for you and your health is going to be the best for your baby, because you have to be healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally to be there for your baby. And some of the best things that happened during this time was talking to my dermatologist, for example, Dr. Chi. Flat out said, I breastfed my first baby and I formula fed my second baby, and they're both healthy and they're both smart and they're both thriving. That put things into perspective for me. All the amazing mamas who adopted, they might not be breastfeeding or be able to get breast milk. Those babies are thriving because they're loved. And I just wish I saw a video of an experience like mine to take that guilt away. I wish I could have shared this with my past self so that I wouldn't have cried and hated myself and felt so angry at myself, blamed myself for being lazy or not committed enough, or not disciplined enough to go through with this. Because sometimes it's okay to know when to call it so that you can focus on what's really important, which is the health and happiness of you and your baby. The one thing I think we need to all do is support every mama's decision. We could do a better job with supporting moms by offering different places for moms to nurse comfortably, by education, by supporting them through time at work and refrigerators and things like that, and supplies, and making breast pumps and parts more affordable, especially the more innovative cordless ones. We can support formula feeding mamas by finally creating a formula that isn't full of crap. I'm not saying formulas are full of crap. They're very nutrient dense and built to feed the baby, but it could be better. We could have better options. We could have cleaner options that are filled with more nutrient dense ingredients available to us. We could have better formula options that do not have palm oil or canola oil or any seed oil, sunflower oil. We could have formulas that have whole fat, that don't have corn syrup and sugars. We can have that, and then on top of that we can have it at a more affordable price point. We as a society have to give women and moms and dads better options. That's how we can support everybody. And we have to educate everybody to understand and to not make people feel bad for the choices they make, but rather support them by giving them better options, more affordable options. If you are expecting your baby, or if you are breastfeeding and you're having a hard time, I just want you to know that I support you in whatever decision you have. You can reach out to me via DM on Instagram. I check my DMs pretty frequently, and I'm there to support you, whatever your decision is. You're not alone. You're truly not alone. Whether you're breastfeeding, formula feeding, or combination of everything, you are not alone. It might seem like you are, especially on social media these days, but you are not alone. And anybody that has anything to say that can make you feel negative about it, or that is making you question your choices and your decision, F them, because they do not have that right to have an opinion on your decision. I hope this video helped you in some manner or form, and I want to thank you for listening to my breastfeeding journey, and I hope you would check out some of my other videos. I do weekly vlogs here to share with you a little bit of my life, and I also do a lot of product reviews beyond beauty. My main channel is a beauty channel that I started 7 years ago, but I've clearly grown in those 7 years, and I love sharing product reviews and sharing with you guys things that work for me and don't work for me, as well as just lifestyle content. So if there's any video suggestions you would like to see on this channel, make sure you leave it in the comments. I upload at least once a week here every Wednesday, but sometimes twice a week with bonus videos. Bye!